Awesome. All right. So now I want to bring on our next speaker, Crystal Kitanovski. Crystal is actually um, uh, we met because she was one of the first people to go through our coaching program. um, Crystal is actually a chemistry PhD who has made the transition into legal tech and is now the principal data scientist at a legal tech firm. So I'll let her give a little bit more of her introduction. So, welcome, Crystal, and take it away.
Thank you. That was a very warm welcome. I appreciate it. Um, like Angela said, I'm Crystal. I have a chemistry PhD. Um, while I was getting my chemistry PhD, I was working primarily with the Secret Service in forensic pattern detection. And so I used to say that I tripped and fell into forensics, but then after I graduated, I sort of tripped and fell into the legal space. So I say that to say the first point here, which is none of our paths are really linear. And I think that's just something that we all need to kind of accept as people transitioning from academia into industry. Um, Working in forensics, I got very used to being the only chemist in the room, um, the only chemist at the conferences that I was presenting at, certainly the only chemist writing any papers or reports that government officials were reading. And so I think that sort of taught me uh, my value wasn't necessarily in what I knew as a chemist, but it was in how well I was able to explain why it was important to everybody else. And I didn't understand how important that was really until I hired Angela as my therapist. Not really, but uh, I joke that Angela is the world's most underpaid therapist because she really is just a wonderful person who will make you feel like you can do absolutely anything in the world and will just convince you that the sky is the limit, and then she will repeat it until you actually start believing it. Um, but yes, chemistry PhD, Secret Service in grad school. After grad school, started applying for jobs, was not having much success. Um, I feel like grad school gives us all sort of the unique understanding that there are experts of everything, but none of us are experts of everything ourselves. And so I was like, okay, I need to find an expert in writing resumes and finding jobs. There have to be people in the world that are really good at this thing. Um, and it's not that you can't get good at it, but I think it's important to recognize that it's not a skill that we're all born with. It's okay to say, hey, I'm not great at this. I need to find some help, ask some questions, figure out what the resources are, and then use those. Because we're not all born with the ability to write a sparkling resume right off the bat. Um, so, yeah, I think there doesn't need to be any shame or stigma around saying, hey, I have no idea how this works. I need to ask some people some questions. I need to maybe not build the world's largest, most impressive network, but at least like talk to some people, step outside my comfort zone a little bit and have some conversations to get a better understanding of what is going on. Um, and for me, honestly, I think that's kind of how I ended up working where I currently work now. I was willing to have conversations with other people that I maybe didn't have a whole lot in common with, one of which was the CEO of the company that I work at now. Um, so, yeah, I think stepping outside of your comfort zone, having the ability to ask for help and seek out the resources available to you, those were really the things that were make or break for me in terms of turning it around and being able to find a job. What else? There's a light at the end of a tunnel, and it's not a train.
I like that, Crystal. I think one of the things that was interesting is your experience. You mentioned this, and I think we saw the same thing with Skylar, where you have a non-linear career path for sure. So, how when you're talking about your narrative, how do you thread those things together?
Well, differently, depending on what job you're applying for, is the answer. You have to be able to figure out how the work you did somehow relates to the job that you're applying for. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a very clear cut, you know, connection. But this is one of those critical thinking skills and those creativity skills from grad school where you're trying to figure out, why is this experiment not working? This is the 743rd time that I've tried to do this. Why isn't this working? You have to be able to look at a job description and say, okay, I can relate my skills to this particular bullet point in this way. Or maybe it's impossible. Maybe you really can't relate your skills to whatever is in the job description. Get creative and maybe say, hey, I did this one thing, but I think based on some of the challenges that your business is facing, maybe what I could do or bring to the table would be this. And this would be how I would look at this problem, or maybe suggest we solve it this way. And at the end of the day, I think even just being willing to do that, even being willing to take a guess, that's impressive to recruiters these days because people are so used to playing it safe and being scared to just throw something out there and kind of see what sticks. Uh, I think just having that ability to try to speak words and somehow sell your skills is worth it in a way.
So one of the things that I find really inspiring about your particular journey is I remember a point where we kind of had a conversation about, I need to get in there just to get some skills. And so maybe I need to consider other roles that I wasn't considering. And so when you started at in your current position, you started out in a research analyst role and within 6 months were promoted to principal data scientist. Can you talk a little bit about like what that looked like for people?
um, I really wish that I could say that there was like a grand strategy involved there. I think a lot of it was being in the right place at the right time. Um, that said, I think it is important to make sure that you're continuously placing yourself in the right place at the right time and you are working hard and learning new things and you are the person who is stepping up and offering to help and rolling up your sleeves, because then when they are looking for somebody to fill a role or perhaps start an entire department that does not exist at the business that you're currently at, all of a sudden your name pops up. And that's kind of what happened for me. Like Angela said, I was working as a research specialist. I got hired to do that role. And then our engineering department was very small and um, disorganized. And then we had brought on a new VP of engineering who also has a PhD. And I think the people in C suite here were like, I wonder what happens if we put two people with PhDs in a room together. Like, does something happen? Is there like a, we don't know. And so that was how I ended up in the room with our new VP of engineering. They felt like we should meet or speak. Um, so we did, and it was fine. But um, as I helped out more in the engineering department and, learned more things and showed that I was the type of person who could be relied on and wanted to help and wanted to learn, when that opportunity came up to fill the role of a principal data scientist, which, by the way, I'm also the only data scientist. It's not like I'm managing a team as of yet. I am the only data scientist. I just so happen to be the principal and the only. But I am building out that department piece by piece. And because this is my first job, whatever, as a principal data scientist, I think that it is helpful for me to be able to build this piece by piece because I'm learning so much as I go through the process of, you know, writing ADRs and figuring out what are all the best practices and making tech stack decisions and different things like that. It's really nice to be able to build it because then I understand it. And so whatever knowledge gaps I had, I'm able to fill along the way. Um, but yeah, I think in terms of getting the promotion, it was just always being the person who was there, being willing to help, being willing to learn and being excited about it in some weird masochistic way all the time.
Um, it's same thing. There's kind of this thread through this. Skylar, our previous speaker, talked about not having all the skills to take the next step and just making herself available and making her knowledge available and showing that she could learn and that she could come in and think constructively. And I think you and her share that based on what you're saying. And so one of the things that we had a question about was everyone says they're a problem solver. Everyone says they're a good learner. Everyone says they're a good communicator. So in that context, like, how do you go about differentiating yourself? Like, how do you actually, when you were interviewing for this company, like, how did you differentiate yourself with those skills?
That's a really good question. Um, I didn't tell them I was a problem solver, so maybe that was the differentiation. Don't be the person who says that you're a problem solver, explain how you might solve a problem because it's much easier for someone to wrap their head around the fact that you are a problem solver when you are actively solving problems. I think it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to be doing it. And that's not to say that you need to be hired on to the organization to be able to solve their problems. But even in the interview process, if you go that extra step and you try to solve one of their problems or talk about it, have a conversation about it. Even if you're wrong and even if you're way off base, you're trying, and that's actively displaying the fact that you are a problem solver. It's just part of your nature, it is innately what you do.
Mhm. And how would you say so there's a question about showing this in the resume, and I know we helped you a lot with your resume of, how do you even show that in the first place in your resume? So when you went through this process, what did you learn through the process of kind of building out a resume that worked?
Ask for help. There are people in the world who know how to do this way better than I do. So that was by far, I'm sorry, but you do deserve the credit on that one. It's not like I figured out how to do this. I just so happened to ask the right people for help.
Okay.
Um, but
So
from what I recall, from what I learned, you need to be able to translate your research and your experience and what you accomplished in grad school in business terms. It's a language, just like anything else. It's learning to speak a language. It's making sure you are reading the job description and not necessarily rewriting your entire resume for each job description, but taking a few minutes to weave in a few things from that job description into your resume. That way, they're able to read it and kind of have like threads to pull. Um, it's easier for someone to remember you and to relate to you, and then to pick up the phone and have a conversation with you when they feel like they have something that they can talk with you about and something in common. And that commonality happens to be, do you fit this job description? So make sure you are adding that commonality factor into your resume. Aside from that, Angela, you used to always tell me that I am a lot more animated and funny and human in person and oftentimes on my resume before it was rewritten by the lovely Angela. My resume was really dry and boring, and that's not who I am at all. Um, So it was trying to figure out how do you strike that balance between being you when you're silly and goofy and self-deprecating at times, um, and professional, but, like, there has to be a balance there because otherwise, when somebody has an interview with me or a conversation with me, and I handed them a really dry, academically written resume, they're gonna be thrown off when they have a conversation with me for the first time. They're gonna be like, so whoever you are, whatever your personality type is, just make sure that there is some part of you in your resume. That way, it's not a shock to the system when these people read your resume and then go to try to talk to you in an interview. Like, it's okay to be you. You can find a way to professionally be you.
Yeah. I think there were a couple of things in your resume that just stood out in showing that dry humor, Crystal, that I remember in your professional summary, you came up with this phrase that was like basically how you write code that works and keeps working. And it was like this kind of tongue-in-cheek thing that everybody who has ever coded understands that coding is a constant, like, search for getting bugs out or making sure
Yep.
that it works in a scalable way. And then I remember you also put something in your cover letter around like that makes, you know, I have enough experience with failure to, understand how to deal with it and make the late nights feel like part of the plan. So there were these just tongue-in-cheek moments in the way that you presented yourself that somebody who getting in front of you now is not wouldn't be surprised. Some you getting in front of somebody wouldn't be surprised by
Right.
that context. But I also want to address, because you kind of brought up how we helped you with it, um, that I think one of the biggest mistakes that PhDs make in their resumes is that they're descriptive about what they do. And they end up describing themselves in a way that just looks like a regurgitation of the job description. And now with AI, it makes that problem even more prevalent. I see this all the time. And when everybody has access to the job description and everybody is describing themselves in a descriptive way to match the job description, everybody ends up looking the same. And so when you come into a resume that actually talks about what that person did, and I know Elena talked about this earlier in the week about how to build a resume, but when you read a resume where it gives specific examples of what somebody has done, it completely stands out. So it's not colors, it's not graphics, it's not anything fancy on your resume. And sometimes to PhDs, what we tell them to put on there is something that for them goes, well, yeah, no duh, everybody does that, right? Sure, everybody does that, but people don't talk about it that way on their resume. And when you're looking at 100 or 1,000 resumes and all of them describe what they did without giving examples, the ones that give examples stand out. Um, so I think that's, for those who are wondering how you do this in industry, like what makes you unique are your specific experiences and your specific examples. And so if you just describe that, hey, you use genetic techniques to research cancer, great. So did 100 other people who are applying for this research position about a new cancer drug. But when you come in and you tell me, you know, what specifically you did, how you did it, and the specific results that you got for that paper that you wrote, that is what differentiates you from everybody else in the pipeline because you're using different language and you're using language that matters to me as your audience. So with that, um, I do want to thank you, um, Crystal. And then, sorry, we have one other question in here that I think maybe now you're in industry, Crystal, you might be able to answer. So, why are publications not considered a demonstration or proof of skills? Why are they so overlooked?
No one cares is the short answer to that question. No one cares. Nobody's going to read it. No employer is going to go and read your dissertation. Mine is 240 pages. That is a book. No one's going to read that. But you need to be able to concisely explain why it mattered. Why is it important? What is different as a direct result of the work that you did? Because otherwise, why does it matter? Um, and if you can do that with your research, with what you did in grad school, you are set up for success in industry because that's all business is. Tell me why this matters. Tell me why I should invest the money in this. Tell me why I should spend the money on this. Tell me why I should give you the time to do this. Tell me why the business is going to be better off. That's it.
Yeah. Yep. And then
It's
being able to
impact.
do that in a concise way where people feel that their time was well spent reading it.
Yes. And that is not going to happen with a 240-page dissertation.
Yeah. So Um, okay, so Crystal, I want to thank you for sharing your story with everybody. I am always inspired by your story because of the risk taking that was involved in it, of putting yourself out there, of really putting in the work to shift your mindset and not let it affect who you are, which can be really difficult in the job search when 90% of the time you're getting rejections. And I just think it's a really inspiring story, and you continuing to watch you grow and develop in your career is like something I just completely love and enjoy. So thank you for taking the time. This